Hi, this is yours Peels with another edition of 3D Printing News Unpeeled, courtesy of 3dprint.com. And today, with your 3D Printing Additive Manufacturing News Roundup, we start with the Mink Makeup 3D printer. Mink is actually it's an inkjet printer that prints ink that is apparently skin safe on powder. And what you can do is you can input kind of an image, and then it'll turn a powder bed essentially into a exact color of that kind of image. So what it does is a makeup printer in the sense that it can print powders that you can then use as eyeshadow or contour materials or all sorts of things. So you could take like a palette or some image from a movie or some new color and then get the up-to-date latest makeup powders. Now, Mashable, where this article, there's a video as well, comes from, call this a 3D printer. I'm not so sure it's a 3D printer, but what is interesting is that a lot of people always talk about category creating or new category busting type of devices. And what we're seeing here is a technological device invented by Grace Choi, is the founder of this startup, Mink. And this essentially for a makeup studio or makeup school or makeup artist or somebody who's very fervently into this gives them a new ability, an ability to get a certain palette made up to date you could have some new colors that came out from some fashion designer, and that person could have that makeup palette in their house that day. So this is a very kind of breakthrough type of a way to use technology to help a group of people that don't really use things like 3D printers and stuff like that. Again, I don't call it a 3D printer, but this is something that if Ms. Choi and the startup get it right, and they're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. They're going to have to develop their own channel. They're going to have to develop the need for this, and they're going to have to develop kind of like influencers, and they're going to have to develop regular people just wanting this and seeing the value of this. So this is a very heavy lifting type of startup to do. You know, you're not just trying to sell somebody a better television. You're trying to change the way they behave. It's very difficult. But to me, we don't do enough of this. So it's a 3D printer that I don't call a 3D printer. I wouldn't class it as such, but this is kind of the stuff that the heavy lifting that we could be doing as well to really break open markets and really do things. If you see, a lot of people are just making the same old 3D printers and same or a little bit slightly tweaked versions of them. And no one's doing something fundamental. Like what could be a real 3D printing application for this, for example, is 3D printed masks or facial masks or kind of a reusable facial mask with custom nutrients in it, stuff like that. Yes, a lot of heavy lifting there, but then it'll be a completely new personalized facial nutrition, customized to your face and needs and stuff like that. That'll be a really fundamentally new kind of approach to the market. So, yeah, this is going to be Mink is going to be a very uphill battle, but if it wins very big. So that's why I think this kind of thing. Maybe think, oh, it's eyeshadow and blushes and stuff like that. That's not really for me. Well, it should be. We should be doing more things like Ms. Choi is doing. So. Um, there's another article, this is kind of from Ars Technica, about distributed 3D printers to be used for a dam in China. Now, Ars, which is a really good publication, by the way, does kind of go into the idea that this is some kind of a plan. I don't know if it's a plan. So it's a paper by Tsinghua University, which is a very good university, by the way, and some students and researchers there have kind of, you know, postulated the idea, kind of launched the idea of 3D printing a 181-meter high dam using robots that are or different robots that are all coordinated together and by artificial intelligence to print parts of these dam in sequence or at the same time even. So one robot could be getting raw material, the other one could be printing a layer, the other one could be coming right behind it. Meanwhile, another part of the dam, another robot is printing another part of the dam. Now, for me, this is a paradigm as an overall idea, distributed autonomous or semi-autonomous robots printing together would be for such really large structures really logical. Indeed, I wrote an article about this like really long time ago. And to me, this is really logical. Imagine trying to build a giant frame to build a printer to make the dam. That just, you know, given the lack of geometric complexity, and then at the same time, the size of the thing, that completely doesn't make sense. But at the same time, having like 30 different 3D printers crawl over this structure I think does very much make sense. So as a bit of IP, as an idea to postulate, as something to get like the planners and central authorities in China kind of think about, I think um, it's a very fundamentally very interesting thing. But at the same time, as a something they're going to do in X amount of years, I don't know. Like China's government, the communist government, has in communist times, since Mao onward, had a real big fascination with dams, especially around the Yangtze and the Yellow River. And here, we're talking, a dam without any human labor that's supposed to be 5 billion kilowatt hours of electricity produced. Meanwhile, these rivers at the moment are well, especially the Yangtze stuff is like very dry at the moment, so this is like very much a moot point right now. But anyway, there's already 11 dams on the Yellow River as well, but it's kind of like it's part of this Communist Party mythology almost in conquering this river and using it for the good of the society. In the beginning, in the 50s stuff, China was very poor, but it could do such national projects by directing a lot of its attention and doing something very big, very imposing, world's biggest dam kind of stuff. That could really excite people's minds. It didn't, as a country, have the infrastructure or the money to, for example, give everybody a fridge, right? That was not tenable. But if instead they were building a really big dam across a really big river, that they did have the money for. So it became kind of a fascination for leadership, and years later, it still is a fascination. Also, previously, as in thousands of years, different civilizations in China have all kind of like dammed rivers, and it's kind of a sign of civilizing nature and kind of like supremacy over nature and harnessing nature for good, to stop the rivers from flooding and protecting people and using it for good. But so I'm kind of looking at this as kind of it's a cool idea. Definitely is a cool idea, and I definitely think that something like this is going to be very relevant. But this as a project, let's say, I don't think it's really relevant or it's something that's going to happen very quickly. This is another thing that's really old, and I'm kind of ashamed of mentioning it here, but I need to. It's a carbon parts made by Sculpteo that are being used by Oracle for server mounts. Now, I happened to find this on, I think it was LinkedIn or something like this, and it was a carbon white paper, right? And and I missed this. And I'm talking about 2015. I don't know when they made the white paper. Maybe this came out years ago, and I'm just a complete tool for missing this. But it struck me as something that is worth thinking about. We're seeing companies like Hollow AM. We're seeing companies like Fabricate making parts specifically for electronics, specifically for um, a large scale kind of packaging or semiconductor, just operations, and we're seeing that grow, and we're seeing a lot of heat sinks, for example, being created. So that's one fast-growing application where we could really have legs. But we really only think of like copper and aluminum, maybe, and steel, maybe, or other parts doing this. We don't really think of polymer parts. So to me, this is a great case. I completely missed it. Where in 2015, yes, I'm sorry, apparently Oracle or Oracle Labs, kind of like this innovation part, Oracle needed very specific server mounts, and they needed these mounts for making kind of like for them relatively small series racks, but they needed 10,000 parts, and that's quite a lot of parts. But it was kind of like a Goldilocks kind of project where like the molded thing would kind of not work and powder bed fusion kind of not work. So I ended up with using carbon for this. And they ended up using a material called RPU 70, which quite maybe a bit surprising. That they'd be using like a polyurethane-like material for this kind of application. But they ended up printing 10,000 board alignment brackets. And we really completely excel at this kind of stuff. A really small yet complicated thing in a really compressed time frame that needs, in this case, one of the things that they also needed was several design iterations and things like that. And it needs to be available to certain places at certain times. So I love this as a case. And if you, just like I did, and maybe it came out last week, this case study, I really don't know. But if you missed it, and maybe it's someone, sorry if it came out like 7 years ago and I completely missed it, but I still think it's super relevant and a super good case to illustrate what we could do, because these kind of is these server alignment brackets, is a board alignment brackets that are meant to get these boards to line up when they click together. Is that going to be a huge 3D printing application? Well, I don't know if it's going to be the future of our industry, but I do know that if only a few players in a few cases with a few servers want to do this. We're already making tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parts if we're talking about a larger go-to-market. So it doesn't have to be the future of the whole industry to be a very interesting application for us. So I miss it. Sorry if it was out there for a long time. The number one news item is that Össur as buys Naked Prosthetics. So Össur, Össur, I think maybe is an Icelandic company actually. You don't hear a lot of Icelandic companies. Iceland is a very small company, and they're probably very proud of Össur actually because it's a 600 million revenue business in prosthetics and orthotics. Now the prosthetics and orthotics market is super fragmented. So on the way of the orthotics and prosthetics practitioners, they're usually 1 to 2 person shops, very local customers, because you have to you have to see the customer. So he has to come to you, and you have to work with them to develop the right prosthetic. So these businesses are really small. There's very little consolidation in the service side of it. And then also on the making of these devices, there's also very few really big companies. There's Ottobock and Össur are quite large, but they're also, it's a very fragmented market. So, Össur is very notable because it's acquired like a company per year or something since 2000. So about acquired over 20 companies. This is the 21st one, I think, already. And now they bought Naked Prosthetics. And so, you know, I'm following 3D printing and orthotics and prosthetics very closely. I also do a podcast about the subject because together with Brent Wright, because I'm like so focused on this being a huge area, because I do think the digitization of orthotics and prosthetics is going to be huge. A lot of prosthetics are going to be made with 3D printing, and Naked Prosthetic was a company that is using 3D printing. So the first time we heard about them at 3dprint.com was, I think it was, I don't know, 2000, was the company started in 2012. I think we wrote about them first in 2015. And they were using, I think they won a competition at Forum Labs, like a Forum Labs Tough Resin competition, because they were using it in developing and also end use parts on their finger-based prosthetics. So Naked Prosthetic makes primarily kind of different types of finger-based prosthetics for different kinds of users. One of these users is Colin McDuff, and Colin McDuff is a U.S. Army vet who also lost a finger. So he was actually trying to solve his own problem and ended up starting a company solving everyone like him's problems as well. So I think that's a wonderful story for this guy becoming kind of like a super user and trying to use 3D printing technology, starting with a Forum Labs printer, and then building a company around it to become really quite big in this really specific finger implant. What Naked Prosthetics did, they made really cool looking. I think we cannot be understated. I think how important it is for some people specifically to have prosthetics that don't make them look kind of really disabled, but kind of make them look rather futuristic and cool and make them kind of stand out in a positive way. For some people, that's really important. Others just want to blend in. But for some people, I thought aesthetically, these things were amazing looking. And I think they were designed really well, designed really cool. And they also apparently worked really well as well. And they were really good at articulation, and gripping, and the key things that are really important for these type of prosthetics. Um, generally, I think this is a very great move. Seeing that the prosthetics industry is taking 3D printing more serious as a development and production technology, and seeing that they're acquiring businesses in this space, acquiring businesses to consolidate and use these things themselves. And if a company like Ulster uses it, we're going to probably see that technology reemerge in different systems. So that to me is the news of the day today. And what I forgot to do completely was show you the images. So I'm sorry about that. So we'll go back and we'll do that again. So the first image, this is of the Mink inkjet printer, and you can see that the printer itself is it uses kind of powder, and it colors the powder, and it can replicate images into turning them into things. Then the second thing is just as a picture of a dam. This is not really super relevant. This third thing is the actual carbon 3D printed clip made by the technology clip and their TPU 70 or material. Their RPU, sorry, 70 material, and they made 10,000 of these for Oracle. And this is what I was talking about previously. This is beautiful. I think this is a beautiful prosthetic device. I think it's incredibly good looking, and also apparently, for what people say, very functional as well in terms of the gripping and power it has, and of course the versatility it has to actually help you in day to day. So, well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your attention.